I just thought that you're going to do my presentation. Well, dobre utro and good morning. Yeah, as Alex said, I'm Christian Teuschel from the Research and Development Department at the RIPE NCC. And I think as many of you, I had a very good party and social event yesterday, and I'm very glad that I rejected the offer to go to the karaoke bar afterwards. Sorry, Igor, for that, and Sophia, we're going to do that another time. Well, this raises the chances that we're going to have a successful presentation, and many of you might know me because it's not my first ENOG meeting. It's not my first time in Moscow. I think roughly 2 years ago we had a regional meeting here, and I was here in the same hotel, in the same room, and on the same stage. So it feels a bit like home. Today I'm gonna present you a country analysis on 4 key topics with regard to the internet. But before we're gonna start, I would like to give you a simple introduction. The presentations or the topics are data-driven, and data, I think, is almost like the new gold, right? Data-driven decision-making helps us to form undisputable insights into various fields. And this is also what I want to follow with this presentation, and what would be a data-driven presentation without data. And the RIPE NCC provides 3 very important data sets for every internet researcher. And the first one is, of course, the registry, so the internet registry, that's the RIPE database. Then we also have routing data, which is collected with the RIS system. And we have, as an example of an active measurement network, we have RIPE Atlas. And all this information you can access via RIPEStat. Alexander mentioned that before. RIPEStat is the open data platform of the RIPE NCC and a big data information service for internet-related numbers. And it is quite popular. On average, we see more than 55 million requests per day. And this is, of course, a huge improvement, because when we started out with RIPEStat, it was around 10,000 requests per day. So RIPEStat has gone a long way. As I said, in this presentation, I want to give you a data-driven view on Russia, and a very powerful mean in data science is comparison. I tried to do the same in this presentation, and I tried to compare Russia with other countries. And I came up with these countries. So right now and that's completely fair, you're going to ask, why did I pick Germany and Russia, France? And, well, it's very obvious, it is not the size of the country. Because as you can see, Russia is huge. It is actually a different reason, because in this presentation I want to also bridge the gap between internet and economy, and that's why I want to show you the population. And the population, we're going to have 140 million in Russia, with 80 million in Germany, and 66 million in France. The reason why I chose Germany is because within our region, there's no other country that is comparable with Russia related to population. That's why it's Germany. And it's France, because it could be considered half of the population of Russia. Why do I focus on population? Because I think population is an indicator for economic potential. And you will see that in the next slides, what I mean with that. The first topic that I would like to cover is IPv4 depletion, because we all know we are running out of IPv4 addresses. Have already a little bit. And the first thing that we would look at is the number of IPv4 resources. And there we're going to see that, well, Russia is in the lead. Then we have Germany, France. If we're going to look that up on a historical trend, then we're going to see that although it's a bit on a different scale, it's kind of the same trend, right? So I think that's not too interesting. A number that's far more interesting is the number of IPv4 space. And again, if we're going to look at the historical development, we see a difference. And before, Russia was in the lead in the number of registered IPv4 resources, so that means allocation and assignments. Here we're going to have completely a different picture. So we have 45 million IPv4 addresses in Russia, 80 million IPv4 addresses in France, and 180 million in Germany. What does that mean right now? Let's put that into perspective. First of all, I would like to get the focus on the internet penetration. So this is data from the World Bank. It's from 2016, but I think interpolation is still valid right now. We're going to have Russia with 73% of internet penetration. So that means that 73% of the population has access to internet. Then we have France and then Germany. What I actually wanted to get to is combining the internet penetration with the population. What do we get then? Exactly. We get the internet users. And I think this is a moment to stop and think. When I said before that population is an indicator for economic potential, what is the number of internet users? Well, that was a bit of a rhetorical question. It is the potential or an indicator for the potential in the new economy. And as we all know, the new economy is kind of the driver for the economy nowadays. Because all incumbent companies, companies that exist for 100 years, whatever they did with 1,000 employees 20 years ago, they do with less. Because everyone is optimizing, right? Otherwise, you're going to go out of business. So it's up to startups and companies that completely get into new fields to create jobs, right? So this is very important, and that's why I think also the government is very interested to kindle startups. Anyway, let's go back to these numbers. What we're going to see here is because Russia has a lot of has a big population, we see that related to the number of internet users, it is leading in this comparison. And I think right now you already see where I want to get to. If we're going to combine the number of internet users and the number of IPv4 addresses, then we're going to get to a very interesting metric. And that's the number of internet users per IPv4 address. And what we're going to see here is, first of all, more is not better, right? Just to clarify that. That means that on average, we have in Russia more than 2 internet users on one IP address, on one IPv4 address. And in other countries, we have, in the comparison countries, we have less than 1. I think I don't need to tell you what that means. First of all, you're going to destroy the end-to-end connectivity, the principle of the internet. That's one thing. The other thing is that you need network address translation so that these people can be online. That makes the operation of the internet more complex and more prone to failure. Oh, all right. I think I really need to speed up because we don't have so much time. So right now we could also combine that with the population growth, but in this case, I think I'm going to skip that. And I'm going to go to the next topic. This is internet and economy. The reason why I put internet and economy in there is, well, a special driver for that was a study done by the World Bank, which found a correlation between the increase of broadband penetration in a country and the gross domestic product, so the GDP. And in a nutshell, it means if you're going to increase the broadband penetration by 10%, then you can expect an increase of GDP by more than 1%. If we're going to look at these numbers, here we're going to have the GDP per capita. We're going to see that Russia in this comparison is the lowest one. But I think this is not really the point. What I want to get to is to combine that with the broadband penetration. And here we're going to see that this study has actually some kind of value. We can also look at the historical development of the GDP in Russia. And just before this study came out, there was a strong correlation between economic growth and broadband penetration. But don't be fooled. Our economy is not purely made up of how the internet is doing. And this is also what we're going to see in this graph. So in 2008, we all know there was the second great contraction, aka the financial crisis, which definitely had a huge impact on this graph. Then, let's talk about IPv6, because IPv6 is the future. Let's see how Russia is doing related to IPv6. First of all, we're going to look at the number of registered IPv4 resources. In this comparison, Russia is actually doing quite well. But the number of resources is, of course, not that telling. So we also see that the trend between these countries is in a way the same. More interesting is the IPv4 space. And here again, we're going to see a different picture, that Germany has the biggest amount of IPv6 space, then we have France, then Russia. Although Russia had more registered IPv4 resources than France, this is an indication that there are more but smaller resources. But again, right now I'm not doing the comparison with the internet users because IPv6 is so huge that would be ridiculous. What I wanted to add is another measurement data set, and that's coming from IPNIC, and this is kind of combining what end users experience. So how many end users are on IPv6? And we have some top leaders. We also have Germany in there, where we're going to have 40% of IPv6 capable end users. Then we have Russia with 1.8%, but I would not be too worried about that because we have, above Russia, we have 53 countries or regions, but below we have 181. So Russia is definitely not in the long tail. And what we can also say is that these measurements are based on Google advertisements. And as far as I know from a talk with someone from Yandex, Yandex is a very dominant search engine in Russia. So I think these numbers need to be taken with a grain of salt. Not last, not least, you can also look up all this data on Ripestat. And I also compiled a page where you can see all the graphs that I showed in the interactive manner. All right, this gets me to my last topic. And I think I still have 5 minutes for that. Perfect. So, RIPE Atlas, how many of you know RIPE Atlas? All right, that's, I would say, 32.3%. So, RIPE Atlas is an example of an active measurement network. It consists of hardware devices that the RIPE NCC gives out to volunteers, and these volunteers host these small devices. As soon as they're going to connect them, they're going to run basic measurements. And these basic measurements could be ping, traceroute, SSL, or to a certain extent, HTTP measurements. It is quite successful, so recently we celebrated more than 10,000 probes, so that's great. To put that into perspective for Russia, we have 474 connected probes in Russia. That's good. We also have 650 probes that are considered in Russia but not connected. So if you're going to have one at home, check if it's connected, because otherwise it would be a waste. Anyway, coming back to this, to the topic, we have 4,600 networks on the internet from Russia. So that means all the insights that I'm going to show you in the following slides can at best only be 10% of the entire network in Russia. Well, this was the warning. There is another warning. We have a service product which is called IXP-Country Jedi, which uses RIPE Atlas to create, to define and measure the locality of, and right now I need to be really careful, of trace routes. First of all, this is based on trace routes, right? I said it again. It can be an indicator, of traffic, right? Only can be, so this is a warning. How do we do that? We know a couple of probes in Russia, and then we let them run trace routes from one probe to another one. And if you assume that both of these probes are in Russia, then this is a measure for local traffic, right? What we then do, we're going to take all these trace routes and we geolocate them. And there can be two things that can go wrong. First of all, the number of probes. I said at best 10%. And the second one is geolocation. Geolocation data is a really difficult data set to get right. It's very simple, right? IP address, where is the location? It's super difficult because internet is topological, geographical location don't really map on that. So what I'm going to show you on the next slide is a map where we geolocated all these trace route hops. And again, it can be, but doesn't have to be, an indicator for the locality of traffic. Well, you're warned. What we're going to see on the left side is IPv4, on the right side IPv6. And the bottom line is that local trace routes don't stay always local. So we're going to see some well-known IXPs in there. So I think I see a couple in Europe and also one in the Middle East. And there's a similar picture for IPv6. Again, to interpret the data correctly, I would need much more time. So I invite you to go to the URL and look it up yourself. And if there are any questions, then just find me in the break. Last and not least, I also included another measurement data set, which is different from Atlas, because Atlas is about connectivity. This is MLab. MLab focuses on bandwidth. And what we're going to see there is the comparison between all these three countries. And I took the median of broadband availability for end users. What we're going to see there is that 50% of users in Russia have less, and 50% have more than 7 megabits per second. In Germany, that's 13. In France, it's 7.8. What's also different is that if you're going to look at the long tail in Germany and France, that the available bandwidth can go much higher. And that gets me to the end, and I'm going to welcome questions. Just a moment. Just need to boot my translation device.
Dmitry Morozovsky, Renet. Not really a question, but a comment. 400 probes for 6,000 networks is not 10%. It is actually much worse, because many networks has more than one probe.
Mm-hmm. All right. Don't mix up the registered ASNs and the routed ASNs. Routed ASNs, we have 4,700. That was in the comparison. But you're right. What I took for this comparison is I wanted to have the number of networks that are, I hear myself, the number of networks that are active on the internet, and not the ones that are just registered and sitting somewhere. But thank you very much.
Коллеги, еще вопросы?
I think there's Nishal over there.
Да.
Nishal Govardhan, No Hats.
Christian, thank you for the analysis of the addresses per population. I think that was quite useful to have, but it seems that it's biased on one bit. You don't seem to consider what addresses are being used for, or you considered it against population growth, but what about things like virtual servers and large large data center hosting and things like that? How do you think your analysis would be skewed if you had to consider the some really large VPS provider or something like that in one of these countries?
Yes. That's absolutely correct. Thanks for that comment. The number is simplified. It should be just an indicator of what's going on, but I was only taking the available, the registered IPv4 addresses, not even the ones that are routed, right? So the number would go down. And I was only taking the population into account. What we also need to think about is that all the servers need IP addresses. So this number is much worse in the end, in a way, yeah.
And probably another step would be take into account only population from, say, 10 years to, say, 75 years, because too old.
Слишком молодые или слишком молодые, слишком старые не всегда будут, не будут, так сказать, применяться. Да, совершенно верно. Вот этот анализ я упростить пытался, я не хотел его усложнять. То есть много других способов улучшать результаты, но общая идея понятна, да. Потому что есть один момент интересный, вот это наличие данных определяет качество анализа. И я пришел к выводу в моей ежедневной работе, когда мы работал в НИОКРе, что когда нет данных вообще, или когда плохие данные, что лучше, что хуже, и то, и другое очень плохо, и тогда результаты будут ужасны. Поэтому я упрощал результаты для того, чтобы дать общую картину. Я также являюсь послом подобных видов усилий, поэтому yes, some was asking me about probes. We have this ambassador, so a person who is distributing probes, and he's got these probes. So then probes is a good chance. So he's distributing probes. So we had this probe. So we was working on this project. So 2 more guys, and so they will talk more about this. The latest news. So one of the news that we're moving over to the new platform, and in this connection, so this is the transition period, and that's for a certain period of time. So distribution of probes will have certain technical challenges. Not so much challenges, but temporarily just we suspended this, and so the probes that our ambassador has is a good chance to get them very quickly. Okay. And the last, thank you.